Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. We are in about dead middle of our church history class here on Wednesday nights. We've been doing it in a kind of 2-week transition period where we will have one Wednesday where we introduce a topic and we look at a biblical pattern, we look at biblical instruction, and then that following corresponding Wednesday, we look at the 2,000 years of church history where that topic is discussed. So we started out with issues like creeds. We learned about the biblical understanding of creeds. Then we studied the 2,000 years of history. Then we looked at leadership in the church. How is leadership structured? We did the biblical pattern first. Then we did the 2,000 years of leadership. We are introducing a new topic tonight. We're calling it cooperation. Cooperation is typically the term or the phrase that you'll hear when discussing these different topics. More bluntly put, we're going to be talking about finances, what we use our finances for, how and who we share those finances with, and then also this last part, the responsibility of the handlers. How does the money get collected? How does it get passed? Who's in charge of dealing and distributing? Lot of conversation about this topic tonight. I especially appreciated Wade's prayer because I was this close to scrapping this, pushing it 2 weeks off so that we could do instrumental music tonight. Because that's a topic I can do. I have rarely seen a good argument for instruments. I feel comfortable in the scripture behind it. That would be a good 2-week study. And we'll get there, because I didn't want to do this. And I was reading, over the past week and weekend, and I always try to find articles that are published or produced by people who have the exact opposite opinion of what I'm going to try to talk about. And they terrified me. Some of these people, they are writing wonderfully clear of their position. That is contrary to what I think we find in the scripture. And I'm reading through, and I'm wrestling with all this, and finally it got to about Monday where I stopped being stressed about this topic, and I realized, I think part of the problem with having these money conversations is because we get so freaked out about it, and we forget that we need to discuss it just like every other topic that we've discussed in this class. The same way we talked about leadership, the same way we talked about creeds, the same way we talked about function, the same way we're going to talk about instruments, we're just going to look at the biblical pattern. Maybe it's because we have such an attachment to money. Maybe there's some greed and we have a desire to handle our money even though it's not ours in the way that we want to. Let's put that aside tonight. Let's look at what truly the purpose is behind our collection. Why do we gather it in the first place? And why do we send it out? So here are questions that we're going to look at. Tyler, could you move the cursor over to the right screen? There we go. So why do we even take up a collection? Why do we do that? We could read tons and tons and tons of verses about you, the Christian, need to go out and feed the poor, clothe the naked, attend to the sick. Tons of those verses. And we should do that. And there is an obligation there. Well, if we're doing all of that at an individual level, and we believe that that's part of our purpose as individual believers to go do that, it's counted as a good work, it's spiritual fruit, well, then why do we even need to gather money collectively? What's even the purpose behind that? And then who manages the money once we collect it? Once we have money pooled together, as we're going to see some examples in the New Testament church, who is managing the funds? Who do those funds go to? How are they directed? And it's a little bit confusing if we don't have the function conversation first. You guys remember the past 2 weeks, I've been hitting hard. We need to understand the function or the purpose of the church first before we have this talk. We're going to look at some of these money questions, why people are saying, well, why aren't you spending money this way? Why aren't you spending money that way? Why isn't your money going to this cause or that person? And now we already have this foundation of maybe that's not our function. Maybe that's just not what we do collectively as a church. That's not our mission as God's body here assembled. I don't want to gloss over, though, the controversy within some of these topics. It's good to wrestle with this. Just to kind of open up some of the things that I was reading, I want to read from you. This was a seminary out of Kentucky, I think, and this is one of the harshest ways I think it was put. So I'll give this kind of as our starter. The writer says, "It is amazing that the saints-only brethren can come up with biblical rules for the church treasury when the Bible says nothing, not a word about a church treasury. The saints-only brethren will take money from the treasury to pay the preacher, build the building and pay the mortgage, pay the utilities, and take care of the building and the grounds. If their position is correct, it is scriptural to take money from the church treasury to buy fertilizer to feed the lawn, but it is unscriptural to take a single penny from the church treasury to feed a hungry child or provide care for a needy orphan. Bottom line, they care more for the grass that today and tomorrow is cast into the oven, but they care not for the human soul." That's the depth of this conversation. That's why I want to start here. Not to freak us out, not to scare us, but there's passion. There's passion on both sides of this. Let's go to the Bible. Let's go to the Bible tonight. Here's our outline. We are going to look at Christians taking care of other local Christians. That's us. That's us right here. Christians gathered together. We're going to take care of each other. We're going to look at Christians taking care of our worldwide spiritual family. We're going to look at the famine in Jerusalem, the classic example of the collection being gathered there. And then also the support for the preaching of the word. This is what we've learned so far, and I really want to hit this because we have to have this foundation before we start talking money, because we will so quickly start to change our vocab, and we'll change the meanings that we've already established. We talked about church. Talked about what the church is, how it's kind of a weird word. It really just means the called out. It really means the collected. Well, when I'm reading people who are, violently opposed to the conversation we're having tonight, they don't have the same definition of church. We say church is the called out that belong to God. That church does not refer to the building. Church does not refer to a corporate institution. We're not a business. But it is rather a group of people and believers. Shoot, Brennan, where's Brennan? I promise you all, Brennan spell checked everything at the Chick-fil-A, and he changed that for me. But I'm sorry, I guess it's not just the updated version. You're going to see some spelling errors. Brennan did fix them, though, so credit to Brennan, no credit to me. The purpose of the church is spiritual in nature. We talked about this as well. This is our function. Purpose is not to rid global suffering. I'm glad that's not our goal. We would never accomplish that goal. It's not to form a social club. We talked a little bit about that too. It's just not our purpose. It's not our function. There is a social aspect, but our purpose is to call sinners to repentance. We have to remember what we studied in previous weeks before we move on. Can I pause here just for like opening comments before we go into these three different categories? Hey, Jay.
Can I address what you went over with the criticism?
Yeah, please.
I found it interesting that the example they gave, did it refer to someone's health, or what was the actual example?
Yeah, I think they wanted a child, yeah. To take a single penny from the church treasury to feed a hungry child.
A hungry child, and
Yeah.
and they talk about souls.
Mm-hmm.
So they're contradicting themselves in their own argument. But
Yeah.
at any rate, I understand the emotional
Oh,
argument.
definitely. And here's the deal, guys. And we should do this regardless, no matter what the topic. If we are reading people's positions about these certain touchy issues, and you all of a sudden see emotion after emotion tugging on the heartstrings, we need to pump the brakes because we're spending so much time trying to stir up the argument. I was emotional at the end of these. I was angry. I was upset sometimes. Good. That's what they wanted me to be, so that I would turn away from the pattern that we're going to learn tonight. Just kind of a little outline of class. We are going to look at these three different categories of collecting and giving. But then at the end, for the point of discussion, I really want this to be a discussion about halfway through. Obviously, I want your comments throughout the class, but about halfway through, we're going to look at these different examples. And I'm going to pose these questions to you all. Someone says this argument, I'll put up on the screen. What's our defense? What are we going to say about that? This is a topic that a lot of us, I think, kind of silently sign our name to because we think we have to believe this. We think that we have to have these views financially, but that is not what we're called to in belief. We're called to actually defend. So it's not enough just to be like, yeah, I think I believe that, but like, I would never bring that up to someone. Well, if it's a part of the command and structure of the Lord, that's going to be our goal for tonight. All right, here we go. First one, why collect money at all? This was totally new to me. I didn't even think about this as a starting place, but Ryan brought it up in the high school class. You know when Jesus went around in his ministry, they kept a treasury? That was like actually a practice that they did, and that should make sense to us. So whether we call it a treasury or we'll find out here with Judas, it's a literal bag of money, this is a normal thing that whenever people are going around doing missionary work, doing the work of the kingdom, they're going to collect money together. So let's go ahead and have some readers. Can I have someone go ahead and read our passages in John? Let's flip over to the Gospel of John. These are quick. We're not going to dwell here for a super long time. But it shows an example. Let's go to John. We're going to start in John 12. And then could I actually have someone read 5 through 7? John 5 through 7.
I got you.
Thank you.
Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it.
Very good.
Jesus said,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, please keep going. My bad.
Jesus said, leave her alone so that she may keep it for the day of my burial.
Awesome.
For the poor, oh wait, that's it. My bad.
You're doing great. That's my fault on communication. We're not going to stay here for a super long time, but there is the idea that when Jesus is going around, there was just a logistical need for them to gather money together. We shouldn't think of that being a crazy radical idea when people be like, oh, the church treasury, it's not even there. I understand that the church is not established yet. Just a common sense principle. These people need a living. These people are not just, staying in one motel after the other. They're not getting all their meals for free. They're gathering money together, and it just so happens that the worst person who could be in charge of the money bag is in charge of the money bag.
You're probably going to hit this later, but the next verse is the entire point. Is Jesus saying, the poor are always fixing to be with you.
Yeah. Are we going to solve this issue with the giving of the money? Yeah, we'll get there in our different questions, but absolutely. And then, Jay, could you read 13:29 for us as well? 13:29, still in John.
Yep. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, buy what you need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor.
Yeah, so context of this is, this is the whoever I give this piece of bread that I dip into the cup, that's going to be the person who betrays me. And he gives it to Judas, and the disciples are not really understanding that. And they initially think like, oh, maybe that's because he's in charge of the money because he has the money bag. The only point that I'm trying to make here is that when Jesus went around ministering for 3 years, there's nothing wrong with them having a centralized collection of their money. They had needs. They had to go from place to place. Those things cost money. They gathered it together. They put Judas in charge of the treasury. Could I have another person? We're going to flip over to Luke 8. Luke chapter 8. And then verses 1 through 3, please.
Now it came to pass afterward that he went through every city and village, preaching and bringing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom had come 7 demons, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's servant, and Susanna, and many others who provided for him from their substance.
Awesome, thank you. So we're still talking very fundamental here. We're not getting to big, high, churchy words yet. Just very simply, how is this provided for? Well, the women that were following Jesus around, they freely gave, right? They had excess from whatever income, whatever properties they had, whatever assets, whatever it was. They gave to Jesus willingly. Jesus took that money. They put it together in a treasury and a sack of money. Judas was the person over that. What we're going to find out, though, is that we don't really need to call it treasury. People freak out and they say, well, show me where the church treasury is. It doesn't matter if we keep this in a bank account or in a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket behind the baptistry. It does not matter. We have, thanks, Jake. We know that just the collection of money is something that has to be done in order to function. In order to do this ministry, money was gathered. It wasn't gathered in a weird way, and he wasn't getting tax credits from the Roman government or weird things like that. Individuals privately giving, collecting it together. We'll end on this point in 1 Corinthians 16:1. We're going to look at this passage again, and so you're going to be like, why are we not reading the whole thing? I promise we'll get there. 1 Corinthians 16:1. It's a common passage read on Sundays for us. We're going to go more in specific about what this passage is actually asking us to do. But here's our transition point. Okay, well, that was Jesus. Jesus, he collected money together, but what does that have to do for the church? Do we have examples of the church doing that? Could someone just do 16:1, please?
Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do.
Okay, basic, fundamental. We're baby stepping into this topic. Now we know that us, as the church, and I love this passage because we're talking about multiple different congregations now. So it's not just a command that, okay, one specific congregation in Galatia, you guys are allowed to pool your money together. No, this is instruction for the churches, just like what Jesus did with his disciples. We're going to be able to pull money together. Any comments here? Yes.
That word collection, here's a definition out of a lexicon. A collection of money, especially a collection for sacred purposes. That's outside of the New Testament too.
Yeah. So this speaks a little bit to our purpose already. We're not just, gathering this money together so that we can establish some sort of a club, that we can somehow bring financial security to all of us collectively. It has a spiritual purpose, right? We know that there's going to be a function behind it. It's not whatever function we invent it to be, but we're gathering it together for a certain function. Later, we're going to talk about the word koinonia, everyone's favorite word for fellowship. That has both secular and spiritual purposes, but their collecting, their giving, their contribution is the word fellowship. That's what they're doing together. We ready to go into our 3? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I wasn't sure if you're going to go back there, so I wanted to point out in Luke chapter 8, when it says that these women are giving out of their means. What are they giving out of these means? Support. Well, verse 1 specifically says these people were going around proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. So they're supporting, giving money to support what? The spread of the gospel, the spread of the good news of the kingdom.
Yeah, they saw what Jesus was doing. Oh, here's this man. He's going around preaching good news. That's something I want to support financially, and I'm going to give to that. Awesome. Anyone else? Okay, let's do the first of our different categories here. Caring for the local body. So we are assembled together, whether you want to call us a congregation, whatever that may be. We are a local body of believers. We have scriptural backing that our finances can be collected together to do what? To support us. To support us. So whether you want to call it the local body or you want to call it your Christian family here in Ellisville, we're talking about the same thing. Let's dive into some of these different conversations. Acts chapter 2 is where we'll start. Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, if I could have someone read 41 through 47. 41 through 47, please.
I'll read it back.
Thank you.
40, so those who received his word were baptized, and there were added the day about 3,000 souls. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of the bread and the prayer. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were gathered and had all in common. And to what verse?
The end of 47, please.
And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, sitting in the temple together, and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and in their hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the number day by day those who were being saved.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so what's going on here? What's happening in Acts? What does this have to do with our money conversation?
Well, so far you've shown biblical authority or biblical examples of Christians spending the combined collection, I think that we were just talking about, 1 Corinthians 16th chapter, for needy saints, those that had need in both Acts 2 and in Acts 4.
Definitely. Can we look in verse 45? I would have never considered this to be a common sense understanding of this, but a lot of these, different articles or essays that I read that were taking the opposite position looked at verse 45 and said, and distributing the proceeds to all, and used that word all to mean like, no, we're talking Christians and everyone else. All. What's the problem with that in the context here?
Verse 44, and all those who believed were together and had all things in common. We're talking about the believers.
Look at all of the different, plural uses here. When we say they, in 46, attending the temple together in their homes. So we're meeting in the homes of unbelievers. It's there, right? It's everyone else's. They received. We're talking about everyone. No, we got to read this in context. Got to read in context. Any comments here, or we'll push on? Yes.
Just to jump down to the beginning of chapter 3, we see the lame beggar. He's asking for money. We just read that they had all things in common. They said, I have no silver or gold. So if it was their priority to provide for him financially, they could have gone to the brothers and gotten the silver and gold that they all had in common. That's not what their priority was. Their priority was for his soul.
So our nice picture up here is of the man Jake's talking about. This was a man who was, they say day by day, he was laid down by the beautiful gate, and he would ask for alms. And here come the apostles coming by, and they acknowledge him. It says that they turned their face to him, and they said, I have no gold or no silver. Okay, either they're saying that metaphorically, or they're liars, because they just got a big old pot of money a few verses ago. Trust me, they had gold and silver. They had gold and silver. But they say, no, I say to you, get up and walk. And so immediately we went to spiritual. They could have very simply been like, okay, here's a man. He has a need. Let's take this before the other elders. Let's bring it up for discussion. It wasn't even a question for them. It was, oh, I know how to solve this. Let's talk spiritual things. Thank you, Jake, for that. Anyone else?
I also think
Yes.
in verse 42, 2, where it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fellowship is a reference to this giving, which takes some establishing.
Yeah.
But our giving and sharing, well, that's the word fellowship. Our sharing
Mm-hmm.
is fellowship. And the reality is, I don't have that fellowship with people who aren't God's people.
Yeah.
I might like them, they could be my friends, but
Mhm.
I don't have fellowship with them
Yeah.
in that way.
I always think this conversation could sound exclusive
Mhm.
or ugly
Yeah.
if we weren't evangelistic. If we didn't want everyone to be part of this, it would be exclusive
Yeah.
and it would be ugly. But since we are evangelistic and we do want everybody to join this family, it's a beautiful thing where you're saying, first and foremost, I care about your soul eternally, and then if you have need, what's mine is yours,
Mm-hmm.
hands down.
Completely. I mean, how great would it to be, or how great would it be to say, I want to break bread with you? Not, I just want to give you bread so that you and your family are comfortable. No, I want to gather around the Lord's table. I want to break bread with you. Right? Whether we're talking about the Lord's Supper or about just sharing meals together, there's a lot more behind that phrase rather than I'm going to fill your belly. Right? I want to break bread with you. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's look to Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4, if I could have 32 through 35. Acts chapter 4, 32 through 35.
And the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. Neither did anyone say that any of these things he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. With great power, the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. Nor was there anyone among them who lacked, for all who were possessors of lands or houses sold them, and brought the proceeds of the things that were sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet, and they distributed to each as anyone had need.
Thank you. I mean, we could have very similar comments here, but main point, of those who believed. Of those who believed. Often we have conversations about, widows and orphans that get brought up. I do want to touch on, the orphan case. We have time for it. We're going to go there really, really quickly. If we could flip over to 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5. This is really the densest of our 3 categories, so I'm okay spending some time here. We're going to go more quickly through the next 2. 1 Timothy 5. The reason why we go here, one, because widows and orphans are often brought up, but this is a time where we see when we give to one another out of need, there is still common sense involved in it. It is not, well, this brother said he was in need, and so I immediately have to oblige that said need. No, we are still using strict scrutiny when giving our money, even with one another, right? We want to give the benefit of the doubt to our brothers whom we love, but it is not the case that whenever a need is just called upon, that we have a biblical obligation to answer that need. One of the ways that we can look at that is with widows here in 1 Timothy 5. A little bit of a longer reading. Could I have someone do 3 through 16? 3 through 16.
Honor widows who are widows indeed, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return to their parents. For this is acceptable in the sight of God. Now she who has a widow indeed and who has been left alone has fixed her hope on God and continues in entreaties and prayers night and day. But she who gives herself to wanton pleasure is dead even while she lives. Prescribe these things as well, so that they may be above reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his own household, he has denied the faith, and he is worse than an enemy. A widow is to be put on the list only if she has not less than 60 years old, having been the wife of one man, having a reputation for good works, and if she has brought up children, if she has shown hospitality to strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has assisted those in distress, and if she has devoted herself to every good work. But refuse to put the younger widows on the list, for when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation, because they have set aside their previous pledge. At the same time, they also learn to be idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach. For some have already turned aside to follow Satan. If any woman who is a believer has dependent widows, she must assist them in the church. She must assist them, and the church must not be burdened, so that it may assist those who are widows indeed.
Before I open up with our question, just right there at the end, let the church. How are we burdening the church if the church doesn't have collected money? No, we have collected money. That's been established now. But here's my question to you all. So we give money without restrictions? What are some of the restrictions?
So,
Yep.
sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, you're good.
So this is impactful to me in this whole discussion. This is probably, I think this is the linchpin that makes it all fit together. It's the case study that makes everything else fit together. God is not a God of confusion. We talk about the law of the harmony of the scriptures. God is not the author of confusion. Everything harmonizes together. And this concept of, these are believers, these are members of the church, these are people who are among our own number, and yet they've got to meet all these qualifications before they're put on the list to be supported. That whole concept, to me, doesn't harmonize or fit in a framework where we could also say, oh, but we've got this other category over here that we can just help anybody who we want to. And what that leads to is this attitude. And this is a very kind of I don't know, entitlement kind of, well, if we can't get them in through this loophole, we'll look for this loophole over here. It's an attitude that's not appropriate to take with the scriptures. Well, we can't get them in under 1 Timothy 5 because they're only 58 years old. But we have this other understanding over here where we can help anybody who we want to. So we'll just bring them in under that.
Yeah.
And folks, that is the wrong attitude to approach God. God is getting at something here, and I think you're making the point. There's a care to be taken with the money that's been collected, and if we can only put widows who are widows indeed, who meet all of these restrictions, all of these attributes before we can put them on the list, the only way that harmonizes is if we, look to the scriptures for what it says and who else we can support. And like you've already pointed out, it's very restrictive language for the believers, for the saints, and for those that don't believe, for those of our number.
So it's going even further to say, well, not only could I give to an unbeliever, but I can actually prioritize them over a believer because we have all these different restrictions for those who do believe. So we can't have the scrutiny for our own and then say, yeah, but those outside of the household of faith, actually, no qualifications. Nick, do you have a point?
Yeah, I think verse 16 makes the point too, that it's these people that don't qualify as widows indeed, as Rob said, or my translation says truly widows, those people that the church is called and commanded to take care of with church finances that are grouped together that we're talking about here, those people aren't left on the streets. They're saying your relatives are commanded to take care of those people. So in those circumstances, every single example that we look at, these circumstances where the church might not be wise in spending their money that way, or we don't have an example to spend our money that way, or are commanded to spend our money that way, a lot of that work is still called to be done, but it's called to be done by you, and it's called to be done by me.
Thank you.
That relates to what Nick is saying, and you may get to this verse too. I was thinking of James 1:27, where it's not like, oh, well, then forget you completely. There's certainly things that we can do with our own money, and so that's when that emotional argument that's made is like, I understand that, but you're making an emotional argument that contradicts what's being said in the Bible.
Yeah.
But with your own money, your own time, your own energy, you are free to make good decisions on how you can help.
Yeah.
others, how you can help.
Mhm.
others.
I mean,
You can do those things.
we're talking about, think about the individual, we're talking about the old ladies. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to care for the old ladies? And Paul is saying, not if she has children. Paul's not bothered by the emotions of this.
I think along with the emotions, it's always easier to spend somebody else's money
Oh,
than
yeah.
it is your own.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
And
is.
everyone else should do this.
Definitely. I'm going to push forward. We're going to spend, I'm going to go ahead and say, not an appropriate amount of time on these. We're going to go quick through them. But this one is almost a repeat of the previous. We can spend money here collectively for the individual saints whom we worship with, who are called out here in this local body in Ellisville. But we also have a scriptural foundation when believers that are not geographically located to us are also in need. We have examples to give to them. I'm going to pick and choose some of our passages here. Let's go ahead and go to Acts 11. Acts 11, please, 27 through 30. I really appreciate the conversation tonight, guys. Acts 11, 27 and 30, please, or 27 through 30.
Now in these days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul.
So who's money going to?
Brethren,
To the brothers.
I mean, if you wanted to, if the Bible of God, or if Paul wanted to make the point here through his inspiration that, hey, we got to help everybody out in Jerusalem because there's going to be this famine, this would have been a great place to make it by just leaving out the qualifier brethren. Hey,
Yeah.
we got to send money to Jerusalem to help everybody out. That's not what it says.
Yeah.
There's qualifying language there.
I love, and we're going to talk more about this next week, about the handlers, the people who are in charge. Look in verse 30, though, and how they did it. They gave it to the elders. Well, if it's going to other people, I mean, why not give it to just the mayor? Why not just give it to the person who's in charge of, whatever principality is there? No, it's going to the leaders of the congregation, because it's going to saints, because it's going to the people under the care of that particular shepherd or overseer. Did you have a comment earlier? I'm sorry.
It's a comment earlier that I think I know the answer, but I wanted to bring it up.
Sure.
The scripture that we read about, they handed all things to the apostles, and they sold everything and gave it all to the apostles.
Sure.
And you go to the next scripture where Paul says, let the family take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've had heard people say, how is that? These people just gave everything to the apostles.
Mm-hmm.
So how's the family going to take care of them if they just gave everything to the apostles? And I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it.
So what I'm going to say is that no one is giving out of their wealth to take on poverty for themselves. I mean, all we have to do is read the book of Proverbs and see biblical money handling, and we know that it would be dishonorable for a man to give up so much money that he can't take care of his own family. And so, yeah, we're giving to the needy, but no one gives to the needy in order to make them one themselves. Does that make sense? Is that where you're going as well there?
I was going to say, because they were apostles, it was a special case.
Oh, definitely. And, the apostles are taking on an eldership role here. And that's why we have to have trust. And we're going to talk more about this too with the handlers of when we give money to our elders, we don't line item that and say, well, my contribution, my mere amount is going to go towards this. It's not what we do here. It's not the example we have. Yes, sir.
So that's a great question, and I love it. I've never thought of that contrast before, and I'm glad that you asked it. I think it helps to understand the answer to that question if you understand what was happening in Jerusalem in Acts 2nd chapter, 3rd chapter, and Acts 4th chapter. Normally, people came for one of the three big feasts. If they were wealthy, maybe they tried to come for several of the big three feasts to Jerusalem, but they tried to make this pilgrimage to Jerusalem from all over the world, in this case, for the Feast of the Pentecost. And then what happened? 3,000 souls were baptized on the day of Pentecost, and they had only brought provisions for 2 weeks. So you have this kind of unique situation where you've got 3,000 plus souls, I guess just the men, so 3,000 plus souls, more were added to the church, I think, in the next several days. And they were from all over the world, and they didn't bring provisions, but for probably 2 weeks. And so what you have is the Jerusalem Christians, in a reversal of what we see in some of these scriptures that you're about to bring up.
Yeah.
The Jerusalem Christians are selling what they have to take care of their brethren who come from all over the world. In this case, it wouldn't have helped to send money to their home churches. First of all, there weren't any home churches. This was the day of Pentecost. This was when the church was established. There was nobody else to send money to. But they were all right there, and they didn't have anything. And so the best way to take care of them is, well, I got this piece of land I'm not using. Your family is off over in Greece somewhere. They can't help you. I'm going to help you out. So it's kind of a unique situation. But as the church is established and it gets spread across kind of the Galatian realm and into Macedonia, now we have this situation where I think we could put 1 Timothy 5 in. Paul says, you've got family, and if you have family, they need to be taking care of you.
Yes.
Let not the church be charged. If they had taken that approach in Acts 2, well, those guys would have been suffering.
Yeah.
Because family was back home in Greece.
Definitely. So here's what we got. We got 3 minutes left, and I am glad that we are having comfortable conversations about this. We got 13 classes, 12 are planned. We're going to split this one. Let's go ahead and end this conversation here. We're going to finish talking about caring for our spiritual family. Next week, we'll do supporting preaching, and then we'll go into, statement, response, statement, response, statement. We'll do those next week. Sound cool? Let's finish up spiritual family. Could I have someone do for me 1 Corinthians? Yeah, we're going to go back to 1 Corinthians 16. Let's read actually what this is about. 1 Corinthians 16. First Corinthians 16, 1 through, let's do 1 through 3.
Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. And when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I will send to bear your gift to Jerusalem.
So we're talking here about a need among brethren, and who's going to give to that? Brethren. We're going to talk more about, the mode in which that happens, how money is transferred. Very similarly, I'm just going to read from 2 Corinthians, chapters 8 and 9 in 2 Corinthians, packed full of this sort of language. I just want to read from the very beginning of 9. He says that it is not necessary for me to write to you about the ministry of the saints. Well, they already know about it. They know about the struggling there. Again, the struggling of the saints. For I know in your readiness, of which I boast about you to the people of Macedonia. So these people, they're being bragged about by Paul. Why? Because they already got money ready for brethren. So I want to end with kind of this conversation because, we have time now. When we are giving to other brethren, from the passages that we've looked at today, can we end just talking about attitude? What's our attitude in this? What was that?
Cheerfully giving.
Cheerfully. We're cheerfully giving. What else? How can we describe our attitude here?
There's a bond that's already built, so you know each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps with being open-handed and generous.
Yeah. Yes.
Out of love.
Out of love. Complete love. We're going to talk more about this fellowship conversation too. When we go through, these different examples of, well, why? Why? Well, the church is a mode in which God takes care of his people. That's one of the reasons why we exist. The church is structured on a family model. So how do we take care of our families? What about this one? Ryan says this one all the time. The financial security of the church is a motivation. Let's not deny that. Let's not deny that there is security in the church along with salvation. What about these? We prioritize spreading the gospel. That's an easy thing to say to someone, right? We don't have to, sit down and have a 3-hour-long conversation about church finances. They don't want that. You say, what do you do with your money? We prioritize the spreading of the gospel. The church is a model for stability in the world. And then, this one, I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's something that we can all agree with. A lot of these individuals who we're giving to, once they become members of the church, once they become believers in this body, you see that they start to grow skills about hard work and dedication to providing, and that the laborer is worth his wages. That's not some miracle finance program that we put on here once a year. That is just Christian living. That's Christian living. And so we will go ahead and do supporting preaching next class, and we'll introduce, well, what do I say when someone gives this argument? What do I say when someone gives this argument? We'll do that next class. Thank you all.